Hello and welcome to the next part of getting Wagoneer Dana 44s under a Jeep Cherokee XJ. To start off this episode, I had lobbed off the ends of my stock rear bumper so it looks cooler, because for now I'm going to be putting that bumper back on the Jeep, and then I cleaned up my trailer hitch. So, I have the stern knuckles, ball joints, bearings, and whatnot, and on both sides. That side has plastic bag on it just so I don't get it all wet and whatnot. But so the next thing I need to do is take care of my steering. Now, I have a 1-ton steering setup that I'm going to end up putting in this Jeep. Now, the way that works is basically, or the way most of them work anyways, is it takes Chevy tie rod ends and drag link ends and whatnot, and puts them on a really thick tube, or DOM tubing, and makes a steering setup out of it, which is great. However, that requires reaming out your knuckles and the pitman arm. And there's a couple ways you could do it. You can either drill it out and then put inserts in it like I have right here, or tapered inserts that'll put the taper on there for your tie rod ends, or you can buy a reamer and ream them out. Now, I had went with the drill out and put the inserts in, which works great for the knuckles because this is just cast. Nothing special about it. I could use normal drill bits, and it drilled out, and I have the insert already in there. Hunky-dory, everything's good. However, the pitman arm is made out of some kind of high-strength steel or whatnot, or hardened steel of some sort. So I couldn't use drill bits, or normal drill bits anyways, to drill it out and put the insert in there that I would have to, because you have to drill it all the way out to a 7/8, which is pretty damn big. So I looked at my options, and I could have went and bought hardened drill bits that would drill this out, but it would have been very, very expensive, because I would have had to start off with a 5/8, go to like a 3/4, then make the 7/8 jump. And I would have spent well over $100 on drill bits alone, probably even almost $200, because a 7/8 hardened steel drill bit is $67. So I went and did instead is I bought a reamer, which is what this is. This is a hardened steel reamer, and it tapers 1.5 inches per foot. So for every foot, it gets 1.5 inches wider like this. And that is the proper taper for 1-ton ends off a Chevy. So, while the cast steel knuckles were fine to drill out, I have to use this on the pitman arm, which will work fine. So, I already went and did a quick measurement with a caliper to see how far up on the reamer I'd have to go, and I'm going to get to work on that. I already tried it to make sure it would work, and it would work. It cuts just fine. So, this tool, special tool right here, costs $85, which is expensive, I know, but it's much cheaper than having to try to buy the drill bits in order to drill out the pitman arm. So, if you ever have to do the job, I would definitely go with the reamer. And in hindsight, it probably would have been a better idea to use the reamer for the knuckles too, but it is what it is. The inserts are just fine. So let's get to work. So, just like any special tool or any drill bits when you're drilling through metal, especially high strength metal like this, it's a good idea to lube it up. So I'm going to lube my tool. Like I usually do, I'm going to use WD-40, that works just fine. Make sure that's nice and lubed in there as well. Now, if you have a tap and die big enough, a tap and die handle will fit on this as long as it's big enough. I do not have one. So, I am going to use the adjustable wrench option, which works just fine. You kind of want to treat this like you're tapping out a hole, really. But it is possible to put this on a drill bit, or not a drill bit. It is possible to put this on a drill, as long as you have a truck big enough. So usually you want to use some sort of hand tool so you have a lot more control over it. So that's what I'm doing. So I'll catch you when I'm all set. So we skipped ahead a little bit
and I have my steering all the way in. As what you're watching now is right after I finish getting it all in there, and the castle nuts torqued down properly and whatnot. And then right after this, I went and did a tape measure alignment on the front end of the Jeep. Now, you might say a tape measure alignment. Oh, and I also went and made spring clips, or not really clips, but spring hold-down clips, I guess, for the coil springs, because the TNT truss doesn't have those. But anyways, a tape measure alignment, because most alignment shops aren't going to really want to align something that has 35-inch tires and is lifted somewhere between 6 to 7 inches, so on and so forth. So you're really sort of limited to doing it yourself, which it's fairly easy to do, to be honest, especially on something with the saw for an axle, because you're not doing anything along the lines of caster or... Well, you do have caster adjustment, but for front end alignment, you're not worrying about that, and there's no camber adjustment, or anything like that. So it's just measure the distance of the front to the back of the tire on the same spot at about halfway up, and just make sure that you have about 1/8 of an inch toe in, and you're all set. And then from there, it's all about adjusting the drag link so the steering wheel is nice and straight for you. And what you're seeing now is just me taking a look at all the parts and showing you, rather, that is my front drive shaft that I will have to be lengthened because it is too short, but it is a damn good looking Cherokee, if I must say. There is still many things left to do, but it's a fine looking Jeep.
Alright, so today we are putting in those pinion shims so my pinion angle points the correct direction. Now, because I have a double carbine drive shaft, that means you want the pinion to be pointed at the output of the transfer case. If you have a regular drive shaft, you want the output of the transfer case or whatever output you have on your vehicle to be parallel to the pinion angle on your axle. But I have a double carbine, so I'm going to have to point that pinion right at the transfer case. Now, in order to do that, I need these degree shims. These are 6-degree shims, and they go under here like this to point the pinion in the right direction. Now, the way this works is you remove the center pin from your stock leaf springs, because I have leaf springs, and replace it with these longer center pins that also go up through the degree shims. Now, if you had control arms that were adjustable, you could just, lengthen the upper link and then maybe shorten the lower link or something to get the pinion to point direct direction. But I have leaf springs, so shims are the way I go. Now, another thing to note, that if you have leaf springs, when you step on the gas, your axle twists. So some people will say that you want the pinion to pointed kind of like a degree below, or a degree to 2 below the output of the transfer case, so when you step on the gas, when the axle twists, it's then pointed right at your output. Either way, you really can't go wrong. So, when you with these big leaf springs that I have, there's not really going to be a whole lot of twisting. There'll probably be a degree or 2. But if you had, maybe stock leaf springs, it might be more twist. But I figured it out one day when I was doing some measuring with a ruler and a angle finder and stuff like that, and the 6 degrees will get me pointed like probably a degree or 2 below the output of the transfer case, which is close enough because the next step up would have been like 10 or something like that. So 6 degrees is what I got.
So at this point, I had the U-bolts all loosened up and off, and I just needed to drop the axle down so I could slip the shaft's degree shims in there and replace the centering pins. I had a decent oh shit moment, of course, because I was, doing it half-ass and using 2 jacks to hold the axle up. So I quickly had to go run and grab some blocks. I had also replaced the e-brake cable, which you can see the black cable right there. I had replaced the e-brake cable on both sides, so I had done that as well at this point, or by this point rather. The centering pin is not super tight. I was able to use a 3/8 wrench to undo it completely by hand, and then it's just lightly pressed in there. You could get it out with a punch. No big deal.
Alright, we got the shims in there. The U-bolts are re-snugged up. The centering pin is tight on both sides. The next thing I have to do is cut those U-bolts down. I'm going to leave about a 1/2 inch on the U-bolts and about a 1/2 inch on the centering pin as well. So you really can't leave them that long. It would be bad because they'll hit up there somewhere. But and then I have to put 55-ish foot-pounds on the U-bolts. The centering pin doesn't really have a torque spec. It's just kind of arm tight.
So the way I went with my angle grinder, nothing too particular here. To get the centering pin cut down, the angle grinder, of course, was too big, so I went and grabbed a Dremel, and I was able to cut it with a Dremel. Centering pin isn't terribly big around, so it's not like I'm overworking my Dremel at all. Luckily, my GoPro doesn't mind sparks, so you get I guess a kind of cool shot here. Next up that I did this day was weld on my shock mount so I could remount my shock. Now this required some time to set up properly. I had already marked those 2 marks there that you saw where I wanted it. I just needed to get it tacked in place, lined up where I wanted it. I had a measurement from the outside of the axle tube all the way to the inside edge of the shock mount, and I also needed to make sure that it was level with the ground, so the shock could slip on there and not be bound out and crooked. This took some time, obviously, because I only have hands, or I only have 2 hands rather, so it took some time to get it into place, and sort of did some acrobatic, not acrobatic anything, but more like yoga positions to hold it in place. Now note, do not do what I'm about to do. Notice which hand has the glove on it and which hand doesn't. I got lucky here and I didn't burn myself. The other side, however, I ended up doing the same thing and burnt the shit out of my hand, or my finger rather. And as soon as that happened, the shock mount went one way and the welding gun went the other way. So, safety lesson: always make sure you either have gloves on both hands or the hand that you're holding the part with has the glove. But I was able to tack it on here. No harm, no foul this time. And then I just went and did a couple other tacks, or better tacks rather, on each corner. So when I went to do a full weld bead, there was no warpage or anything like that. And of course, welding in your back is a pain in the ass. So, that just about does it for this episode. Next time we'll catch back up and see, the finished product of what I'm doing here, and I believe that is where I'll also be showing how I trim the fenders. But what you're watching, you're going to close out with, is me doing the full weld bead on my shock mounts. I was also cautious or mindful of how hot the axle tube was getting, because I didn't want too much heat to get into the center section or out to the wheel bearings. So I took some, decent breaks in between, but it worked out good.